May the words that are heard be thine and not mine. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. From our New Testament reading in Hebrews, since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast then to our confession. Today in Hebrews, we find a revolutionary breakthrough in the theological construct relative to the personhood of Christ. A major theme of Hebrews is Jesus depicted as high priest and king. The association with Jewish governmental and ecclesiastical structures is apparent for the presumed audience of Israeli heritage. Hebrews was addressing the Jews. But that was not the entirety of their audience. These two institutions were the pillars of the Hebrew culture. The king was presumed hand-selected by God, often chosen by a prophet who was considered the mouthpiece of God. And the king was superior in office to all others on the earth, only subordinated by God's self. Jewish monarchy was steeped in Davidic tradition and held absolute power regarding all matters of the state. Everything fell underneath the king. That is, except one: the priesthood. Though the Aaronic priestly lineage acquiesced mostly to the king in official or national matters, once inside the temple, they likewise only answered to God, solely to God. The king's sovereignty did not translate at the altar, especially when the priest officiated sacramentally, particularly when offering or executing blood sacrifices. It was in this moment that the priest served as a go-between God and God's children. Sort of a stopgap, standing in between. This role was considered most esteemed, holy, but also precarious. Let me explain. The Jews believed that the presence of God literally filled the temple in those sacrificial moments. Now, as the smoke from the burnt offerings would fill the space, they thought that God's presence then was imminent. God would come down and rest God's feet on the mercy seat, which was situated purposefully directly above the Ark of the Covenant. Then the high priest would interact directly with God. Only one of pure heart could do so and survive. Jewish people feel like just the mention of God's name brings you into God's presence. It's actually quite an insult to use the proper name of God for a Jewish person. So if we say Yahweh, that is very, very insulting to Jewish people, because they think just the mention of the name is enough. Being in the presence of God was terrible, awful. These are words that are associated with awesomeness or all-powerfulness, because that presence was enough to cause instant death. Instant death. That's important for us to know. Yom Kippur, echoing back to the great Exodus and chiefly significant of the holy days on the Jewish calendar, the Day of Atonement. It's the most notable examples of this practice with the priest sort of as a go-between God and God's people. Once a year, the high priest will mediate to an even greater extent into the immediate presence, the immediate presence of God, believed to be so deadly. This would occur in what was known as the Holy of Holies, this inner chamber that was in the temple. It was behind this big, thick curtain, okay, only opened once a year, and only for a moment as the high priest would slip in there, okay? A high priest would have blood in a basin, blood from a perfectly described, defined oblation or sacrifice. And have a hyssop branch. Dip the branch into the blood and splash the blood onto the Ark of the Covenant. And in this, there's a constant plea for the atonement of the sins of the people of Israel. Okay? A constant plea is going on. He's literally chanting while he's in there. To say that this was horrifying for the priest was an understatement. Weeks of preparation would go into this, spiritual and physical preparation, to make sure that he was in the appropriate spirit before he could go in there. Even so, they would sew bells into the hemline of the robes that he would wear. So that while he was inside, and then they would tie a rope to his foot, to his ankle. If they stopped hearing the bells, they'd pull him out. Dead. Because nobody else could go in there. As soon as you walked in there, you would drop dead. Why? Why go to this extreme risk and measure? All of this was for Israel's atonement. Someone had to stand in the gap. Someone had to stand there precariously so that atonement could occur. Kippur in Hebrew translates as to atone. The high priest would risk to this measure for the sake of all until the next Kippur, when another year's worth of sins would be collected up and offered again. That's why we use the word collect. A collect is a prayer that collects up all the other prayers that are happening. That's why we say a collect at the end of the prayers of the people. We collect up all the prayers and we offer them up at once. And you can kind of see sort of the hearkening back to this practice of as a go-between. No king could do this due to the secular necessity of that position. Kings had to go to battle. They had blood on their hands. They had to legislate. They had to deal with the dirty dealings of government. You know how it works. They couldn't be a go-between. They had to have a mediator. Hebrews then, back to Hebrews, tells us that Jesus is that mediator for us. And not only as high priest, but high priest and king. And not only just the high priest, but the highest of high priests and the king of all kings. He was both. Our mediator is the king. None other since Samuel or Moses has been even remotely similar in this kind of position. A pure and holy and Davidic and divine go-between, ensuring our atonement, and not just in an annual renewal plan. This is once and for all, one time and forever. Christ as high priest, offering himself as a sacrifice to God, who Christ was himself, is the ultimate mediator. Now, let me say that again. Christ, as the high priest, offers a sacrifice. That sacrifice is himself. The perfect, blameless, spotless sacrifice on the cross to the King, who is God, who is Christ himself. It's the perfect mediation. It's the ultimate event in all of history. Wow. This is the essence behind what Job's plea is concerning, in our Old Testament reading. He said, I would lay my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. He wants a mediator so he could be, in his own words, acquitted forever by my judge. Well, guess what, Job? Our mediator is the judge. If you are in court today, okay, and your attorney was also the judge, I kind of like your chances, right? It's a pretty good day for you, right? Hey, we're not going to have a judge today, so we're going to get your attorney to fill in, okay? Well, let me invite myself back into chambers, see if I can't come to an agreement on this. Our mediator is the judge. This is a good opportunity to revisit a concept best described, possibly, by N.T. Wright in his writings on Paul. He states that Jesus, as Messianic King, fulfills the covenantal promise given to Abraham. Now, you remember all that. I'm going to make you a great nation, and your numbers are going to outnumber the numbers of the nation you become will outnumber all the stars in the sky and the grains of sand and the beach, that one. But also fulfills all the prophecy and completes the law. So it's a Jewish application. That's the point. So as if in a day of court, Jesus serves as an ideal counsel. It's like your attorney at law for Israel, and she is acquitted, vindicated before all, particularly those who had persecuted Israel. So there's your echoes of Job right there. The emancipation allows for Jesus, serving as an ideal representative of Israel, to now finally fulfill that covenantal blessing as it was initially intended as the patriarchal promise. And here's the kicker, the clincher. It's not just for the Jews, it's for everybody. The blessing was always intended to be a blessing for the whole world. All nations, all people would be blessed. Due to Jesus' finalizing and redemptive mediation, whosoever includes you, and it includes me. The verdict is not guilty, and all of your offenses are forever expunged. That makes me want to jump up and down. I've got a lot of offenses, and they're all expunged because of a go-between. We are free. Something that once was considered unattainable is now readily available. Look what they had to do in the Jewish culture every year with Yom Kippur. They don't have to do that anymore. It's readily available. And Jesus says as much in the gospel today. Now, the traditional interpretation of this narrative is that the way to heaven is a narrow gate. I'm borrowing another metaphor of Jesus's. Entrance into the kingdom is often inferred to as, well, it's exclusive, it's difficult, and most people are going to miss it. And they're going to end up going to hell. I believe Jesus intends more. Yes, it's difficult, impossible by normal standards. Jesus said today, mortal standards. Like a heavily burdened camel trying to crawl through a small gateway entrance into Jerusalem. Or maybe it's Damascus that was being referred to there. Or trying to thread a rope, like a big rope that you use to anchor down a boat. Trying to thread that through that little eye opening of a needle instead of a string. Try doing that. That's how hard it is. Now, both of these interpretations are considered interpretations of what Jesus meant by camel through the eye of a needle. And they infer that it's not a feasible process. it's an unfeasible task. Furthermore, your wealth or your position or your fame or your church attendance or your good intentions, none of that's going to help you. It won't help. You need assistance. Someone to make the impractical a reality. You need a mediator. You know what you need? You need a good lawyer. Call me, Alabama. Thanks to Jesus, the gate has swung open. It's wide open. And all can enter because of a go-between. Who's with me?